Hello, welcome to Open Labs. This is a space where you can zoom in into the world of a composer. And today I'm going to talk about what I've been working on in recent weeks. And I'm going to guide you through the process I went through first when I discovered a very special instrument, a flute, and then how I went on to build my own version of that same flute. So let's start with this very special artifact. Look, it's quite bizarre, isn't it? If you would see this just laying somewhere, I bet you wouldn't have an idea what it is. It is actually, as you might guess, a slide flute, but it's made of bamboo, and this is the mouthpiece, but it's actually three flutes. Look here are the three flutes, and they're connected to this chamber. So when you blow here, all the air flows directly into each flute, so you can play all the tones at the same time. It's nice to find an object which is made out of natural materials. It's probably only a little bit of cotton inside, so it's all natural. And when I saw it, I was intrigued. Why does it have three flutes? I never saw that. And what I realized is that each flute is tuned in a different pitch. So they're all very close to each other, all the three pitches, but slightly off. So this is the normal. I will mute the other two, and this is like how a normal slide flute sounds. It's also called a swanny whistle in England, and you will recognize it if you don't know it. So it's a sound we all know. It's been played in endless cartoons to suggest that something goes up or down, or just to make a comic moment. I will show you now how the others sound. So two sound almost the same. So it's a very small difference between one another, and it's not because it's not well done. It's not that they wanted to make it exactly the same and then they didn't manage. No, it's on purpose. And the reason is that when you play high tones at such small distances, you get these other tones, like differential tones or interference beats next to it. So it sounds quite amazing, and I will show you how it sounds. But in my work, I always look for sounds that are made through acoustic means, but that resemble electronic sounds. So for me, this was quite a discovery, because when I played it, I thought, wow, this sounds like ring modulation or like additive synthesis. But I will play it a bit so you understand what I mean. It almost sounds like a sci-fi movie from the 60s. The special effects that they had with synthesizers. And so I was thrilled to find such a small object that makes this powerful sound. And I had no clue where it came from, so I did some research, and it actually comes from Bali. I was not surprised, because Bali in Indonesia, that's where the gamelan music comes from. Gamelan music is music they do in Indonesia, which is based on very big sets of percussion, metal percussion, bronze, like gongs, and bronze xylophones, very thick. And it's played by many performers. and it has this massive sound, but with a very distinct characteristic of how it sounds. It has this specific shimmering. And the reason for that is that they build the tuning for these instruments in a very specific way. And that's that they build them in pairs so that one set is slightly higher than the other. So it's almost like if on purpose they would do it out of tune, but they don't work with the concept of out of tune. They work with the concept of this one is just a bit higher than the other one, so that when you play them at the same time, they will create these interference tones, because that's a very special effect that happens. So in their cosmovision, they see it like this: the higher set of instruments is called the inhale part, and the lower set of instruments is called the exhale. So when you play both together, there's this beating that is occurring. The clash of both tones has this beating tone, interference tone, and that would represent the heart, the fact that we are alive. And if you translate that into their religious practices or the rituals, then in that context it would be like the sound of God. These interference sounds would be the sound of God, or the step to get you into a meditative state. So interestingly enough, for Western ears, this sounds is completely the opposite. I mean, for most people, if you play these sounds, it will generate discomfort, or they will not tolerate more than a few seconds, or it's just a dissonance that make people uncomfortable. And while in Indonesia, it's a very pleasant sound and has a much more mystical connotation. Now, in what regarding contemporary music, this interference beats have been used by composers, have been researched very much for the last 60 years. So, for example, composers like Alvin Lucier has worked a lot on that subject. Phil Niblock most of his work is based on that, as well as somebody like Jacinto Scelsi. He also was researching and working on his compositions, guided by that phenomenon. And I call it a phenomenon because, it's when you play it. So this is, for me, this is a translation of the gongs of this gamelan music into a flute. And when you play it, you hear this interference tone so clearly that it has this magical thing from it. It's like, I mean, normally you achieve that through synthesis, but to achieve that just with a small instrument, I find it magical somehow. So then I thought, okay, we have this beautiful instrument. I bought 3 of them even. I thought, oh, I can use them in a piece. It's going to be quite interesting. But then I thought, but why does it have, it's interesting that it has this part here, because that keeps the proportions always in the same relation between each other. The chord, so to speak, is the same always, because it's in a parallel motion, which is great. But I wondered, what would it be, or what would it mean if we get rid of this guy, and then we can manipulate each flute independently. So that's what I did. I thought, okay, I didn't cut this one because I find them too nice to cut. So I thought, why don't I build my own flute? And I do it in a bit smaller way, bigger, so that it's lower. And that's how I came up to build one of these. It's exactly the same concept. It's just bigger. It's based on a recorder, a sopranino recorder. So it's the 3 flutes here. This is the chamber, and this is the mouthpiece. So the wind blows here and it goes directly through to the three sopranino mouthpieces, and these are the flutes, and I chose to use them transparent tube so I could see where the slide was going, because normally you don't need to see that because they were in these ones they were always held together, but here you have independent use, so at least you can see what is the relation between one another. If I want a unison, then I put them together like that, and so that helped. Ultimately, it's kind of difficult to move them, the three of them, at the same time with one hand, so I had to build a little device for that. It looks like a funny gadget here. I'll show you. So with this I can hold the three of them and move them in the different proportions that I want. I can move only two or one. Oh, and I like this chord, and then I move this chord up and down, right? So it's quite practical. And the sound is quite similar, except that of course you have the timbre of the recorder instead of what would be like a tin flute. Let's hear how it sounds. And immediately one can hear the buzzing. You hear the three tones plus the buzzing, which is like a much lower note. The buzzing, I mean the differential tone, and as the move I do to one of these, the buzzing also moves along. It's quite trippy. I'll play a bit more. Etc. etc. I'm still playing with them, and I did a second one because at some point these high tones get a bit on our ears. So I did another one with this exactly the same principle, but it's with instead of sopranino, it's soprano recorders, but the principle is the same. The transparent slides, so you can see where you are. Of course, with this one, it's in the end it's actually three flutes, so you do need a little bit more air than with a single flute. And I'm not a wind player myself, so I don't have the lungs to just go forever. Or let's say I don't know how to do a circular breathing, which would be great. But let's give it a try. See how this one sounds. It's just a bit the same, but a bit lower. can hear the beating, right? I'm planning to write for these instruments in my next compositions, because I think they will mix very good with other instruments, with other registers. I'm gonna do one for ensemble Black Pencil, which uses it's a quintet. They play pan flute and recorders, as well as accordion and violin and percussion. So I think if you mix this instrument with that ensemble, I mean, that if, for example, having the percussion player play together with the pan flutist and the recorder player and create very wicked harmonies and sonorities, that would be very interesting. So I think it can have a very specific musical role. And as soon as I get those recordings, whenever I finish that piece, I haven't even started, but when I have those pieces, I will come back to this open lab and show you how it sounds in the context of a musical setting. This was just the laboratory part, but let's see how can we actually make music with them. So thank you very much for listening, and see you soon.